Spotlight glare freezes midair as Sammy Davis Jr. reels backward, cheek blooming crimson under knuckles. Somewhere downstream in memory, one voice will say, "I never thought a folded piece of paper could break me." Tonight, 1963, crowded. Copa Room, Las Vegas, hums while champagne, chips, careers hang inside smoky hush. Across front table sits Chicago enforcer, tucks loosened, rings winking, grin saying every note here gets his permission. He rises, points toward headliner waiting backstage, and barks through smoke for crooner pick's side. Showgirls stiffen, dealers pause mid-shuffle. Crowd silence says single wrong syllable means livelihoods, contracts, maybe lives. Dean Martin steps past curtain instead, strolling slow, jacket loose, eyes soft, holding drink like nothing happened. Without raising volume, Star glides nearer, sets small creased card beside gun hand, making kingpin study line guess shall remember forever. Breathless watchers cling against chairs, gazes, shoulders rigid, while scores breathe beneath jokes, money, glamour. To understand why this is happening, the story linking Rat Pack clown, partner, ruthless patron haunts nightclub, fear, Vegas. In the early 60s looks bright from the highway, yet the glow hides who holds the keys. In back offices, men from Chicago and New York sign silent deals, and the Strip becomes their showroom. Stars are chips on that table. Sammy Davis Jr. works every stage he can find. He sings, dances, jokes, then stays late to rehearse again. He's the shortest man in most rooms, the only black man at most tables, and he knows a slip can send him back to small clubs that never make the papers. Dean Martin moves through this world very differently. He walks on, drink in hand, lets. Songs seem to pour from thin air, and crowds feel like they're watching ease itself. Bosses like this act. They think they own it. If Sammy stands for grind and hunger, Dean appears to stand for charm with no sweat, a perfect mask in a town built on masks. To understand the punch on that stage, you need to see that divide. One man fights to prove he belongs. The other survives by making effort disappear. And above both, the men with markers believe fear settles all scores. In the Copa Room, a new waiter named Eddie starts that job thinking he's serving drinks to legends. By the end of one shift, he'll realize he's also serving witnesses for a story he'll carry in silence for almost half a century. At night, by the time that night's late show begins, the Copa Room feels like a pressure box. Red cloth, low lamps, tight rows of tables, every chair filled with tourists, dealers, chorus girls, and men who don't clap unless their boss claps first. Eddie moves between them with a tray, still learning which faces you never bump. At the front, the Chicago enforcer sits with two lieutenants and a woman in diamonds who never smiles. They treat the stage like a toy. When they want more songs, they snap fingers. When they grow bored, acts vanish from the booking sheet. Sammy jokes through his opener, light on his feet, voice bright, body already marked by years of falls, burns, and late drives between cities. He can feel eyes measuring him from that front table, but he keeps his rhythm smooth. In a side booth, Dean waits for his set, loose tie, half-shadowed, watching without moving much. Some folks say Dean doesn't care about anything. Eddie can tell he's reading the room. There's an old rule here. Comics can tease almost anyone, but not the people who sign the cash envelopes. Tonight, with civil rights marches on the news and whispers about Sammy's white fiancée drifting up from gossip columns, that rule sits under every laugh. No one in this crowd knows it yet. However, the next 10 minutes will show how thin that rule really is. Eddie feels it in his hands first, a small shake he can't name, just thin. Asterisk music near midnight always seems a little slower, and that's when the crack appears. Sammy slips into a bit about Vegas rules, about who can sit where, about how some folks get rooms upstairs while others are asked to leave through the kitchen door. Laughter rolls across the floor, yet at the front table the enforcer's smile hardens. His date leans in. One of his men mutters. Eddie, weaving past, feels chairs pulled back from the aisle. Without warning, the enforcer stands. He doesn't rush. He turns, steps up to the stage, and walks straight into the light, as if he's part of the show. The band trails off. Sammy tries to spin it into play, but the man comes very close and drives one fist into his cheek, in front of every guest in that house. Gasps break the hush. Glasses rattle. Eddie sets his tray down, frozen, as Sammy staggers and steadies himself on the mic stand. Then the enforcer scowls past him, toward the curtain where Dean waits, and asks in a flat voice who the singer stands with. Backstage, a stagehand touches Dean's sleeve, unsure what answer will let him keep working tomorrow. The whole room hangs on a choice they can't yet hear. Sammy doesn't plead, doesn't walk off, just waits with one hand on his face. Cameras aren't rolling, no reporter stands in the back, yet Eddie senses this scene will live far beyond anyone inside that club after their names fade from light. Asterisk in that stillness, 3 lives and 3 codes meet. Dean stands just beyond the curtain, and memory crowds close around him like the smoke in that room. Years earlier, when Sammy lost an eye in a highway crash and came back to the stage patched and shaky, he worked twice as hard to prove he hadn't slipped. Night after night, he carried jokes that cut his own pride so clubs would feel safe booking a black headliner. The mob liked that hunger. It made money. Dean, by contrast, had built a public face that said nothing could touch him. He let partners rant on stage, let agents panic over contracts, while he tossed lines away as if work were a casual game. That style pleased the same bosses for a different reason. A man who seems not to care doesn't scare his owners. Yet under every laugh sat a simple fact. Both singers knew the men with chips and pistols could end their run with a short nod. On nights like this, Dean's cool pose and Sammy's hard push weren't just styles, they were shields. The enforcer on that front row believed in a rougher rule. To him, any show of defiance had to be met quick and firm, or fear would leak out of the walls. Now he'd tested those shields in front of the crowd. If Dean walked out smiling and ignored the hit, the code of quiet effort would bend toward the gun forever in that glittering desert. Asterisk from the back row. It almost looks like nothing's happening. Dean steps through the curtain as if he's late for a cue, not a crisis. He doesn't stride, doesn't rush. He moves with that loose swing the town knows, glass in one hand, the other tucked in his pocket. Sammy stands off to the side now, jaw swelling, breath shallow. No one tells him to leave. No one helps him either. Dean crosses the stage without touching him, walks to the very edge, and lowers himself to the level of the front table. The enforcer waits, chin high, ready for a joke that'll make the punch sound like play. Instead, Dean sets a folded card by the man's ashtray and leans close enough that only that table hears him murmur, "Read it." The room holds its breath while thick fingers unfold the paper. Inside, in Dean's sharp block hand, sits one plain line. "You just punched the only man in this room they paid to see." The words land harder than any fist. For a second, the boss seems smaller. He looks around and realizes every eye is on the singer he just struck. If he hits again, he risks empty seats, cold stares, and a partner who might walk. So he stands, pulls Sammy into a showy embrace, and forces a toast. Dean turns away, mask back in place. Yet Eddie knows the room will not forget who owned that moment. It feels like the floor itself has shifted. By the next morning, the casino acts as if nothing happened. Dealers shuffle as usual, the pit bosses smile, the enforcer takes his regular booth. Officially, there was no punch, no note, no breach. Yet behind doors and in dressing rooms, the story spreads. A drummer tells a dancer, the dancer tells a bellhop, the bellhop tells a reporter he trusts. Each time, the scene grows a little sharper. In some retellings, Dean slaps the card on the table like a challenge. In others, Sammy delivers a closing quip that brings the house down. Eddie keeps quiet at first. He needs his job. He's seen what happens to staff who talk out of turn about the men upstairs. Still, he can't scrub away the image of that small square of paper on green felt, and the way the boss's face changed when he read it. Months later, bits of the tale start to show up in columns and bar talk across the strip. Over years, writers polish it into a clean story about courage in a dark age, an easy legend that leaves out the long bruise on Sammy's cheek and the tightness in Dean's jaw. The card becomes a symbol, almost a charm. Few people ever ask who fetched extra ice that night, or who closed the door when the dressing room finally went quiet. Eddie remembers a second card, blank, left near Dean's glass, and wonders why no one mentions it when they speak about that show today. Years later, Vegas changes clothes. The old houses fall, new towers rise, and the men who once ran the floor either vanish into prisons or retirement. Sammy keeps working until his body gives out, telling interviewers that he paid a high price to be the clown and the pioneer at the same time. Dean slows down, loses friends, drinks more, and brushes off questions about the mob with half-smiles that don't quite reach his eyes. Many writers tell that Copa night as a turning point. Some call it proof that Dean secretly hated bullies. Others say he simply knew which side of the check stub mattered most. When a small film crew digs into the story for a late-night series, they track down Eddie, now white-haired, living far from the strip. He brings out a small envelope he's kept in a drawer. Inside lies the spare card from that table, never used, yellow at the edges. Eddie says he's the one who cleared it from beside Dean's glass and slipped it into his pocket. On quiet evenings, he'd take it out and picture the words he saw on the first card, sometimes hearing them one way, sometimes another. You might think the legend is fixed, but his voice suggests the sentence changed a little each time he told it. He remembers the meaning more than the exact shape. What never shifts is Sammy's face in that light and Dean's choice to answer with ink instead of fists on that stage. Across the decades, the three men from that night leave very different trails. Sammy dies too soon, worn down by work, debt, and the strain of always being both guest and servant in places he helped to fill. Fans remember the grin, the tapped shoes, the wild jokes, yet those closest to him speak of a quiet hurt that never fully lifts. Dean retreats from shows, loses his son, moves through later years like a man walking through heavy water. In talk shows and books, he's praised as the model of relaxed charm, the fellow who could face gangsters and studio heads without raising his voice. The enforcer fades into crime files and rumor, his name known mainly to buffs who study that age. In most printed versions of the Copa story, the note reads the same way, as if carved in stone. Eddie's memory changes that comfort. Maybe the exact wording shifted over time. Maybe even Dean, if pressed, would have shrugged and said, "It was something like that." What stays solid is the choice itself. A star who could have thrown a punch and didn't. Who used a sentence to put a mirror in front of a man who thought he owned the room. Standing at his window, old now, Eddie wonders which kind of force lasts longer, the fist or the line. The film leaves us there, with that question, and with one small card that never needed ink to carry its weight in the stories people tell later.